Hi, my name is Eric Crone. I'm a high-rise window cleaner in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been doing the work for 12 years. I am currently a union steward and a delegate on the executive board at SEIU Local 26.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and supported entirely by listeners like you. So, apologies to our amazing listeners that our episode is a little delayed this week. Although we did release 3 episodes last week, so Jules and I figured you guys would give us a little bit of a break while we were putting this episode together. So we appreciate your patience, and we wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined us for our first ever listener hangout session this Monday, which was so much fun, and it was just a really incredible experience. And we will be posting the video of that on the Patreon feed for our patrons. So if you want to check that out, then go subscribe on patreon.com/workingpeople. And if you couldn't make this hangout session, we want to make these a regular thing. So we are working to schedule one for next month as well. And we hope you'll join us. All right. So as y'all heard, I've got Eric on the phone right now, and I really, really appreciate him taking the time between, bargaining sessions. Eric's got a lot going on. As y'all may or may not know, high-rise window cleaners like Eric in SEIU Local 26 in Minneapolis are currently on strike, and we wanted to get Eric on to let folks know what's happening. Let us know a little bit about kind of the, important but dangerous work that folks like Eric do, and also how y'all can show support for Eric and his coworkers on strike. So, Eric, I wanted to first, if you can indulge me, this is something that we talk a lot about on the show, right? We really try to, let folks know, the kind of work that, folks are doing out there. And I imagine so many of us have looked up in the sky and we've seen you and your fellow high-rise window cleaners just like dangling from these seats, just at impossible heights. And I just get vertigo just thinking about it. I wanted to ask, by way of kind of getting folks familiar with this, if you could talk a little bit about kind of the work that you do and the all that goes into it, because I imagine most of us have never done that work and have probably never wanted to do that work.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, I can go into that a bit. It's not quite as simple as a lot of people would think it is. A lot of the people in the office buildings that we work under you would think they imagine that we just kind of whistle on up to the edge and jump over real quick, right? It's nowhere near that simple. We wish it was. But generally, depending on the type of work you're doing, if you're doing type F swing stage work, that would be a fixed deck on the rooftop. That is a little bit closer to that whistling off to the edge that you'd assume, but not quite still. You've got to drive that off to the edge, lower it over the side, and then use tag-ins all the way down to keep you hugged up close to the building so you don't fly away and whip around in the wind, as it were. Then there's type T style swing stages that you actually have to bring all the components to the building and rig up yourself, usually with a crew of a few guys on site. That's a little bit more complicated. And then my personal favorite is chair work, where we actually bring ropes out to the building, tie off or clip off to certified anchorage points, and then make the drops from there.
All right, man. So I'm already, like I said, I'm not great with heights, but none of those options, I'll leave that to you and the professionals. So I feel like I would shit my pants if, I even got close to that.
Absolutely. You're not the first person I've heard say that.
Yeah. I mean, not my not my bag, but I appreciate all the kind of care and skill that goes into that work, right? And I know that one of the important parts about the struggle that y'all are involved in right now, right, is to really assert, this work as a skilled trade and to build up,
Mhm.
the kind of programs and provisions, like apprentice programs that would help you kind of develop that trade. And so I want to ask about that in a second.
Sure.
And I guess the by way of getting there, I wanted to ask, like, what the work entailed during the pandemic, because I know that as dangerous as the work is already, that kind of went up to a new level as we were all kind of caught up in this madness with COVID-19. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. Yeah, like I was saying, we do a lot of that high work, but what you might not realize is we do work in high traffic areas such as the airport. There's another company out here that actually has a special services division that does disinfecting on high traffic areas that during the pandemic were excuse me, COVID positive, and they were actually not providing their employees with the correct type of PPE they required. They were forced to go buy their own protective equipment that was subpar, to say the least. Nearly or over 50% of window cleaners in our union actually contracted COVID during the pandemic. It's given us all a scare multiple times. I myself had to do a 2-week quarantine because on multiple instances I have been in contact with somebody who had tested positive for COVID. As a matter of fact, just this last week, we have a driver that would drop us off to sites that tested positive for COVID, and I just had to run up to the airport and get a quick rapid test done so that I could find out today. Thankfully, the test came negative.
Man, that is,
Um,
yeah, that is incredibly scary. And what a staggering number of y'all that either contracted COVID or, were exposed to COVID. That is, I mean, I don't even know what to say
yeah,
about that. And
it's
wasn't it
been intense.
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying it has been an intense ride for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we for listeners, I wanted to give a big shout out to our brother Luis Feliz Leon, who wrote a great piece about the strike that's currently happening for Labor Notes, and we are linking to that in the show notes. If y'all haven't checked out Luis's work, you absolutely should. We did a great bonus episode with him a few months ago. We love his work. But in that piece, Luis also mentioned, Eric, that while y'all were really on the front lines, going into kind of COVID hotspots to clean and stuff like that. Is it true that if you were exposed, if you had to quarantine, that was all unpaid time off?
Yeah, I mean, that same company I had mentioned earlier that was having their guys do the disinfecting of COVID positive areas. Yeah, they had to quarantine with no paid time because they are technically owned by a bigger conglomerate that is a corporation, and they were not required by law to pay their guys quarantine time. I myself had to use up quite a bit of sick time before some of these things passed and were required. And then, fortunately, the one time I did have to quarantine for 2 weeks, I was giving my time. So,
Well, thank God for that, man. But I mean, it's still
yeah.
just like, just really underlines again, like what pushed, you and your coworkers and fellow union members like to this point, right? Is like, you're not getting
Mhm.
the protection you deserve. You're not getting treated with the respect that you deserve. And I wanted to kind of let that lead us into talking about what brought y'all to this point. Could you, I guess, walk listeners through, because obviously a strike is never like the first option, right? Unions and their
No.
membership, they think about this long and hard, right? And when we use the weapon of the strike, right, it's a very deliberate thing that people are doing. So I guess could you talk us through kind of like what the kind of chain of events was that ultimately led to y'all hitting the picket line.
Sure. Yeah, so just before the pandemic had struck, we were currently in bargaining. What was it, February of 2020, I want to say. And we had gone to the table with the bosses. I thought things were going actually quite well, regardless of how many times we had to meet with them to get it rolling. There was still some good back and forth happening, and they had tentatively agreed actually to a substantial raise for the first year of our contract, as well as a few other key points that were important to us, and we had agreed to some for them as well. And we were just trying to work out the kinks in it, as it were. Then all this news of COVID started coming in. They decided they needed a break, so we allowed them a couple weeks to try to see where the whole pandemic was going, where this was going to end up, if we were going to continue to be able to meet safely. And inevitably, we agreed to meet with them at that later time. We met with them. They withdrew every offer that they had tentatively agreed to, and they wanted an extension to the contract for 1 year, which we have just reached the end of as of Saturday. Or no, it was Sunday, my mistake. And they came back to the table. We handed them a proposal that was essentially the same, save about 6 sentences that were added into it that we wanted to, take care of some other business in the contract that we hadn't previously thought of. So from our understanding, it shouldn't have been too difficult for them to come back to the table, see that a majority of this is the same as it was a year ago, and continue working through all these different changes to our contract that we both wanted to make. And essentially, they didn't want to meet with us until yesterday, which was 3 days after our contract expiration. So to me, that's just not bargaining in good faith. I think it's in everybody's best interest to try to negotiate these things and get them settled before we get to this point, because the company doesn't want to lose money. Nobody wants to sit out here and lose money and go on strike. We all got families to feed. We've got rent to pay, bills to pay, etc. And it's just a real shame that they can't be bothered to actually sit down and really get into the meat of everything else.
Yeah, man. I mean, like that. I mean, it really does tell you everything you need to know, right? About, which side is bargaining in good faith and which side isn't, right? And, this is something that we're seeing kind of around the country, right? So many businesses were able to stay afloat over the past year and a half through the sacrifices of their workers, right? Even in dangerous conditions, like you said, a lot of y'all contracted COVID. You were the ones putting yourselves on the line. You're the ones dangling from the top of a goddamn high rise, right? And yet, coming out of the pandemic, so many of these businesses, instead of repaying the workers who kept them afloat and honoring their sacrifices, with better pay, better protections, better benefits, so on and so forth. Instead, so many of these businesses feel like they are the victims of lost profits, and now it's their turn to kind of get back what was stolen from them. And we're seeing that in the way that they are responding to workers like yourselves, and it just it pisses me off to no end. And I mean, I say this, that it pisses me off. I can only imagine how you and your coworkers are feeling, right? But I know that you are in the middle of bargaining, so there's really only so much we can talk about it. But I guess for listeners, could you say a little bit about kind of like what the core issues that y'all are trying to kind of solidify with this contract are?
Yeah, we for a long time have believed that workers in our industry have been far underpaid for the risk we take and the jobs we do. If you look to similar industries to ours, such as glazers, we actually will rig up the swing stages and equipment for glazers to go out and do the work installing the glass. And they make upwards of $40 an hour, and we are still well below 30. So we're trying to bridge that gap a bit. And obviously, we know it's going to be difficult. There's always a lot more to it than what first meets the eye when you're trying to go for those sort of economical adjustments in pay. Of course, that's always what the boss's excuses are too. But I haven't thought that what we're asking is too much at all. We're simply trying to get to $30 an hour, which I think is almost bare minimum for the job we do. Which they haven't been playing very fairly with us. Another thing we're trying to flesh out here is for the last year, myself and a couple of other people in the union, window cleaners, Greg, Naumacher, the president, various other people, we've been working on this certified licensure apprenticeship program that we want to be recognized by the state. We want that to raise standards in our industry to a higher level, reduce workplace accidents, and make everybody safer, as well as adding requirements to the buildings that this licensure be required. I know that was another redundant. We want this licensure to be required to operate these equipments on this building so that people that don't have any of this knowledge and training cannot operate this equipment. We want everyone to be safe and able to come home to their families at the end of the day. I mean, over the last 15 years, there's been 3 window cleaners here that have died. Now, that may not seem like a large number, but when the population of union window cleaners in our state is roughly only 40 people, that is a very high percentage of that.
Jeez, and those were like falling related deaths or equipment malfunctioning?
Yes. Well, there were improper training, I think, and lack of experience, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's all just shortcomings on the end of bosses that haven't been properly training their employees, is what I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, my God, you can't get a more clear-cut example, right, of why, in fact, having that sort of, union apprentice program, those kinds of standards that are set by unions, that businesses need to adhere to, like, why that's so important, right? Because for so much of our lifetimes, we've heard that, oh, this is just, the unions wanting to kind of like control the labor market for this or that trade. And it's like, no, man, if you're going to be sending human beings with families up these high rises to dangle from the top of them and clean these windows, you better be damn sure that everyone is properly trained, that everything is done up to code. And like, if you're going to try to cut corners, that is not the place to do it.
No, not at all. It's absurd. It really is.
Well, I tell you what, man, I know that, you've got another long day of bargaining ahead of you, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I really, appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And I wanted to say that from all of us here at Working People, we're sending you and SEI Local 26 nothing but love and solidarity. And I wanted to kind of just round out by asking you what folks listening to this can do to show support.
Well, I mean, we all love it if people can come in. If you live in the area and you see us picketing and you have the ability and the time to come out and join the line, show your support, even if you're just a friendly face going by, honking and waving, we love that. Really brings our spirits up. It's all real simple things. We're just going to be out here until we can get them to bargain in good faith and agree to something that they should have done a long time ago and what we all think is the right thing.